400, adding like random numbers, and he did not make any mistake. I said, this for me is an annual session review.
This is excellent acoustics. I can hear Leo and Ramon Bueno going on. Yeah. Good evening.
Good evening.
I have the pleasure of presenting tonight the documentary Dis.em.POWER, Puerto Rico's Perfect Storm. Please come in, have a seat, get comfy. I'll take a couple of minutes to introduce some very special people, and then we'll go straight to the movie. There's three numbers that really exemplify the enormity and the gravity and how deeply felt Hurricanes Irma and Maria were in the year 2017, particularly, not only, but particularly in the island of Puerto Rico. What is the number? 3,000 million consumer hours of lost electric service. 329 days. The other number, it's somewhere in between 1,000 and 4,000 deaths associated to Hurricane Maria. The third number, and I always throw this in there, is even having the best resource in-house to deal with that crisis and to deal with the recovery and reconstruction, $512 million of a budget cut to the University of Puerto Rico really plagued this noxious mix of a vulnerable condition that still remains with us today. Two very good friends took it upon themselves to apply an anthropological and cinematographic eye to these events. Sandy Smith-Nonini is an anthropologist at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And alongside Roque Nonini, a filmmaker from New York. Are the authors of this work. I was there on the ground seeing their work, and I was inspired by it. I left the ground, and they followed us to Princeton, New Jersey, because they just had to get it right. And they wanted to check and double check facts. Those facts are still being checked and double checked by new and aspiring academics, Puerto Rican academics. Fernando Tormos is a postdoctoral, is a postdoc at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and at Johns Hopkins University. His work and the work of others in this room is helping us better understand the underlying concepts of this disaster, the distribution of power across sectors, and the networks of power that are involved in both the construction and the destruction of these socio-technical systems. Please enjoy with me this documentary. There will be a discussion with the filmmaker, the anthropologist, and the crazy political scientist that is getting into this energy policy arena. I love this guy. So let's do this. Do I hit the button or you do it? Okay.
We've been the colony of Spaniards first and then of Americans. So we have in our mind a confusion because we've never been actually free.
You have a colony, you can do whatever you want. You don't have to respect anything. You don't have people with voting power in your political system asking for this and asking for that. So colony, of course, is profitable for the U.S. government. If not, they will change this relationship a long time ago.
What you're about to see is not an act, it's a reality. And art is real. And sometimes we have to go beyond so that you can see the truth.
150-mile-an-hour winds ripping buildings apart, knocking out power everywhere. All of the electricity is out tonight.
100% of Puerto Rico now without power. Everywhere you look, down power lines like these, which stretch right across the expressway.
Even before this storm, Puerto Rico had a crumbling infrastructure and tens of billions of dollars in debt. Now this will obviously compound the problems.
Jamás nunca pensamos que fue así de fuerte. Nosotros pasamos Hugo, pasamos George, nunca fueron así de fuerte como ellos, nunca.
My name is Sandy. I'm an anthropologist, and this is a story about the politics of energy. On September 16, 2017, Hurricane Maria made landfall on Puerto Rico as a Category 4 storm. The hurricane devastated the island's infrastructure and destroyed its electric grid, leaving over 3 million people in the dark. Unlike other storms, getting the lights back on in Puerto Rico dragged on for months. Over 3 months for San Juan, the capital. It was nearly a year before power was fully restored to some towns in the island's mountainous interior. Both Puerto Rico's government and its electric utility, PREPA, were bankrupt. This greatly restricted their ability to respond to the hurricane.
In our society, so dependent on energy, and especially on electricity, that after Maria, the whole country was upside down because we didn't have electricity.
como a eso de las 10 de la mañana, me asomo por la ventana cuando veo el techo de mi hogar que se ve. Hacía 1 año y medio que fue construida la casa con mucho sacrificio. Fue un dolor bien grande y sigue siendo fuerte, pues, porque es bien cuesta arriba volver a tener que empezar de cero. Pero con Dios, pues.
¿Sabes? Para mí fue un dolor bien grande, bien fuerte. No pude, ¿sabes? No me gusta ni recordar aquellos momentos que fueron tan malos, tan desastrosos.
You didn't know what was going to happen.
No ATM.
No ATM, nothing.
No banks.
No cell phones, no nothing. You know, nothing.
No había nada.
Bien fuerte, no llegaban los suministros, teníamos que llegar hasta el área a buscar suministros, las filas eran kilométricas, me quemaba del sol para poder ir a buscar agua, ir a buscar alimentos, porque en los supermercados tú ibas, no había nada.
You know, people were tired, frustrated, con coraje, you know, with fear, well, a lot of fear, because it's not fair to be without electricity for so many days. I mean, people were counting the days.
As weeks without power turned into months, families and businesses with the means bought diesel or gasoline generators.
Es fuerte porque el gasto de la gasolina para el generador es fuerte. No podía estar todo el día porque era más costoso, porque la limitaban. Y lo que te daban era 1 galón por día. Sí, hubieron gente que después del fenómeno se tardaron, pero las compraron. Lograron comprarla porque también había un costo. Pero un ruido enorme, me imagino, cuando estaba encendido. Sí, bien alborotoso, demasiado.
Nosotros hemos gastado fue medio como de 200 baterías.
Mira.
Porque hay.
Mira. This is just a little bit. Just a little bit. But we've gone through a lot of. Everybody has gone through a lot of batteries. Mira, ella.
By late spring 2018, Puerto Rico was awarded the dubious distinction of having the worst storm-related blackout in U.S. history. At the center of this crisis is the Puerto Rico Electric Power Authority, or PREPA, the island's ailing electric company. Before Hurricane Maria destroyed PREPA's infrastructure, the utility was already $9 billion in debt.
It's a very old system that had a fight with a big hurricane. Definitely the hurricane won that fight. Almost a year later, there's still people in Puerto Rico without power because of the lack of maintenance.
When they say we have 100,000 people without electricity, we have 500,000. When they say we have 10,000 people, we have 50,000 people. When they say we have 1,000, we have probably 10,000 people.
Doesn't anyone trust those figures?
Yeah, no, there is no way to trust what they say.
In the days prior to the hurricane, the government said they were ready to make an agreement with the Public Utilities Association to come in and help. After the hurricane, all of a sudden we heard, no, we're going with Whitefish. What? Who?
The saga of delays in repair of the grid began with a surprise decision by Ricardo Ramos, executive director of PREPA, to award a $300 million contract to Whitefish Energy, a tiny, inexperienced two-person company.
It was outrageous. You got people here in Puerto Rico doing the same job with more experience than the guys that Whitefish brought. And they were paying the guys from Whitefish like 500% more than the guys from PREPA.
At first, that was like a slap on the face. You know, it was like, well, what is this? $200, $300, $400, $500 an hour. We're in a crisis.
Why then the Puerto Rico government is contracted at such levels?
Puerto Rico is canceling a controversial $300 million contract with Whitefish Energy to restore power to the island. The head of Puerto Rico's power company, PREPA, estimates the cancellation will now delay power restoration by 10 to 12 weeks.
With the Whitefish contract canceled, repair of the power grid fell to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. But progress was slow due to administrative delays and a shortage of parts. By mid-January, both parts and U.S. utility crews arrived, and the pace sped up. But half the country remained in the dark. On January 15th, residents from dozens of rural towns staged a protest in the capital demanding electric power.
The Puerto Rico Electric Power Authority, PREPA, was already a bankrupt, fragile, and useless entity before Hurricane Maria made landfall. The Power Authority's grid was obsolete, lacking adequate maintenance. The recent Whitefish debacle is Exhibit A of the governance issues plaguing PREPA. As we evaluate energy options for Puerto Rico, we must be particularly alert about disaster capitalists who may try to take advantage and profit off of our people's misery.
Puerto Rico had a large number of residents with chronic problems who were put at immediate risk by lack of power for refrigeration, respiratory therapy, or kidney dialysis.
Ella tiene 85 años, hace aproximadamente 4 años le dio un stroke, 2 stroke, entonces tiene paralizado el lado izquierdo.
At first it was very difficult because the ice was a little bit scarce. So she had to throw everything. So 4 of the insulins, they had to throw them out.
I took care of a person who was a cancer patient. It was very tough for those, during that time, 2 months that she was without power. The day that the power came back, I remember it was the 7th of December. I remember that day I took some water I had in ice to give it to the people, to the men who were helping, that turned back the electricity. And I said, listen, you don't know how much I appreciate this for this lady, because she was in pain. She was in a lot of pain.
I mean, a lot of people died in Puerto Rico because they didn't have electricity. We are still seeing people without electricity with respiratory machines and machines in which depends their life.
Maria's devastation was especially horrific in Puerto Rico because its people are so poor. In 2015, the island had a poverty rate twice the level of Mississippi, the poorest state. Yet this U.S. territory receives far less federal aid for social and health needs than do U.S. states. The combination of no power and a vulnerable population may help explain the high mortality from the storm. George Washington University researchers concluded that nearly 3,000 extra deaths occurred in the aftermath. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, was heavily criticized for its inadequate relief efforts following Hurricane Maria. In July 2018, FEMA's own self-evaluation confirmed many of these failings.
No, I am not satisfied with FEMA, and FEMA is not satisfied with FEMA. They said they were not prepared for Puerto Rico. They said they made many mistakes. They sent many field operators who didn't know Spanish. So, the whole thing was a mess. U.S. citizens had to live under these horrible conditions after the hurricane, where over 3,000 people died who did not have to die. So many problems could have been solved if they had just done the right thing. And the right thing was not sort of, throwing paper towels.
How could this happen? How do we account for such a long blackout affecting a large population in a modern society that has counted on electric service for over 50 years? To understand Puerto Rico's economic woes and its failing electric utility, we need to go back to the 1940s.
Well, FERPA is our public-owned utility, which is a monopoly. It was created during the period of the New Deal, electricity being basically the center of our new economic model called Operation Bootstrap.
If you had visited Puerto Rico 20 years ago, you would have said, "Ah, those poor people. What hope is there for them? No wonder so many are going to the mainland." If you visit Puerto Rico today, you may still see slums reaching out from San Juan into the sea. Or they may have already vanished. For there are changes taking place today that only a short time ago no one believed possible. We are tearing down the walls of this Caribbean poorhouse and lifting ourselves by our own bootstraps.
Until 1952, Puerto Rico was on the UN list of non-self-governing societies. And it was in the 1950s that the United States, with the help of Puerto Rican politicians, convinced the UN that Puerto Rico was no longer a colony. And the way they did this was by implementing this constitution. It gave Puerto Ricans the right of self-government. They could appoint their own governor, elect their own governor. This was supposed to herald a new era for Puerto Rico.
Perhaps the most famous ongoing colonial insult for Puerto Ricans is the Jones Act, a federal trade law that requires the island pay a penalty for any imported goods that do not come on U.S. ships with U.S. crews.
The modern history of Puerto Rico, it was marked by the Cold War. After the 1950s, the U.S. need a country in the Caribbean to show to the rest of the world like the capitalism works, because the Soviet Union was using Cuba to show that communism works.
There was this big Operation Bootstrap and this move to industrialize Puerto Rico. However, that was not a move really to create Puerto Rican industries, but rather to make Puerto Rico an attractive site for U.S. industries to come.
We told American manufacturers about the palm trees and trade winds, offered them freedom from taxes for up to 17 years, offered them every incentive we could think of, including a large labor force ready and able to work.
That model that appeared for a while to have brought real economic development to the island and led many to imagine Puerto Rico as a showcase for the Caribbean and as a model of what a partnership with the United States could give you, as opposed to a partnership with the Soviet Union like Cuba had and other countries were considering. For a while, that seemed like a good deal. Puerto Rico had an appearance of prosperity. But again, these were not local companies, these were not local industry that was being built.
The transformation turned out to be something less than the touted miracle of modern progress. Industrialization brought the collapse of the island's agriculture as Puerto Rico went from self-sufficiency in food production to almost total dependency on the U.S. to feed itself. The new factories could not absorb the influx of unskilled job hunters, and fully one-third of the island's population left for the United States.
What happened in the 1970s, that model that was basically industrialization by invitation, that model started to weaken. So what the U.S. did was legislate a new tax incentive that was the Section 936. We can mark the industrialization period of Puerto Rico between 1950 and the 1970s was based on labor-intensive industries, but after Section 936, where we saw was the incoming of many capital-intensive industries, especially pharmaceutical, biotechnology corporations, and in that way, the U.S. was able to revamp the competitiveness of Puerto Rico, and PREPA was able to keep their best customers.
In the 1980s, there were big tax cuts that made it less attractive for U.S. companies to operate in Puerto Rico. And so with the application of NAFTA, etc., U.S. companies, many of them left.
So what happened in 1995? Well, the Cold War was ended, so Puerto Rico wasn't that attractive for geopolitics, and so the tax incentives were removed. So what happened after that? Well, that can mark actually the beginning of all the economic calamities that Puerto Rico has right now. In the case of PREPA lost their best customers.
Our economic model is dead. So the government started doing a lot of things to keep that dying model, economic model alive.
The only tool it had was its seductive power as a side of investment and debt.
Puerto Rican bonds were especially attractive to investors because of their triple tax exempt status, meaning their profits were tax-free at the federal, state, and local levels.
They keep borrowing more and more. And we have to say too, that Wall Street kept giving. They knew the problems. Now we know they knew.
The investors kept feeding it and kept, letting Puerto Rican politicians borrow, partly because they knew it was guaranteed by the Constitution. It dug itself into a hole that it could not get out of. The fiscal board was supposed to be a trade-off for a U.S. bailout package. The United States was supposed to help Puerto Rico with its debt. The Federal Reserve was supposed to help. What they've been doing and what they've shown interest in is just to impose austerity politics, the closing of schools, the closing of hospitals, reduction in public spending, and at the same time they've also imposed the reduction of labor rights. And so that in turn has fueled a migratory crisis where now there are more Puerto Ricans in the United States than in Puerto Rico.
PREPA's large debt and its rationale for borrowing are explained in part by Puerto Rico's oil dependence. When the island's debt crisis began, oil power generation represented 65% of the island's electricity. The largest portion of PREPA's operating costs by far have been spent on cost for fuel.
When the oil prices went up at the end of the 2000s, what we also saw was a very high increase in the rates and also more subsidies coming from the central government to PREPA.
High oil costs also meant that even as Puerto Rico faced bankruptcy in 2015, the island was effectively exporting borrowed money to pay for oil. Energy experts at the University of Puerto Rico determined that nearly 8 million left the island every day to buy oil.
La Autoridad de Energía Eléctrica, PREPA, se diseñó, como la vemos hoy, como la conocemos hoy, para atender un modelo industrial que no existe, que desapareció. En Puerto Rico en la década del 60 se pensaba, que íbamos a tener muchas industrias petroquímicas y que esas industrias petroquímicas iban a generar más industrias satélites.
The current electrical system in Puerto Rico is designed to provide electricity for industrial use. That is why it has very few generation plants, very big ones, and they are all located in one side of the island, but the loads are located in the other side of the island, and that requires a very complicated transmission and distribution system. And the purpose of the electrical system, which was to sustain a heavy industrialization process, was the very aspect of it that made it so weak.
The kind of big apparatus you built in PREPA was not only built to fuel industrialization in Puerto Rico. There was multiple reasonings behind building such a monster, and a lot of those reasons were political.
Until 2014, PREPA was completely unregulated. As a result, the company's direction and budget have been long hidden from public oversight. This secrecy continues. There are conflicting accounts of what goes on behind closed doors.
The whole scheme that was created to help the country to develop has been captured by whichever political party will come to the power. So for 2 decades, the corporation was run like a political subsidiary of the party in power. And if you put that together with an economic model that is basically starving, it's dying, this is the perfect storm.
All the governments for the past years have been treating PREPA as a piggy bank, taking money out of it to fund contracts that are not needed. They spent a lot of millions in gas pipelines that were never used, more than 100 million. All the work was just thrown in a trash can.
I think that our politicians, especially our government, has made this non-written arrangement in which they made PREPA pay for all the things that they want to subsidize to get the favor of the voters, but PREPA pays for it. And they don't have to pay the political price, but PREPA has to pay the money. Every time they do something new, PREPA is going to pay the bill. These same politicians that wouldn't let